You want to know the truth? I almost shot her. That's the part nobody wants to hear when I tell this story around the fire, when the tourists come through, and Marla makes me trot it out like some campfire legend. They want the warm ending. They want the cub curled up on the porch. They don't want the part where I stood in the dark at 4 in the morning with a rifle butt cold against my shoulder, and my heart going like a jackrabbit's, ready to put a bullet into something that turned out to be the strangest gift I ever got. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Let me tell it right, the way it happened, because if I skip the ugly parts you won't understand the rest of it. My name's Cole Whitaker. I've run cattle on this stretch of high country outside Cimarron for 31 years, and before that my father ran it, and before him his. I'm 62 now, which means my knees announce themselves every morning like a couple of rusty gate hinges. I keep a logbook, always have. Every day, weather and losses and births and whatever else crosses my mind, written in pencil in a series of black composition notebooks I buy by the dozen from the feed store. My wife Ruth used to tease me about it, said I wrote more about the cattle than I ever wrote about her. She wasn't wrong. I'm not a man who's easy with words when a person's looking me in the eye, but give me a pencil and a quiet hour and I can say a thing or two. Ruth's been gone 4 years now. I still keep the log. The dog's name was Boone. He came to me the way most good things do, by accident, and looking like trouble. Somebody dumped a litter out on the county road one summer, the kind of thing that makes me want to find the person responsible and have a long conversation with them. And by the time I got out there, the coyotes had done their work and there was only one left. A blue heeler mix, best I could tell, though he had something bigger in him too, some ancestor with heavy bones and a broad skull. He was maybe 6 weeks old and half starved, and he growled at me when I reached for him, this tiny thing with milk teeth, growling at a grown man like he had a chance. I liked him immediately. I took him home. Ruth was still alive then. She looked at this filthy, matted, snapping little animal and she said, "Cole, that dog is going to be more work than he's worth." She was wrong about that. She was wrong about almost nothing in her whole life, but she was wrong about Boone. He grew into the best cattle dog I ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot. Some dogs you have to train every inch of the way. Boone you just had to show a thing once. He watched. That was the thing about him. He watched everything always, with this quality of attention that felt almost human. He'd sit on the porch in the evening and look out at the mountains like he was thinking about something, and I'd catch myself wondering what a dog thinks about. Ruth said he was an old soul. I don't know about souls, but I know that dog understood things. He was gentle too, which is rare in a working dog. He'd move a 1,000-pound steer with a nip and a bark, all fury and business, and then he'd come back to the house and let the barn kittens climb all over him, sleep in a pile with them, wash them with his tongue like they were his own. Ruth said he had too much heart and not enough places to put it. After she passed, I understood what she meant. Because after she was gone, there were nights it was just me and Boone in that house, and I'd sit at the kitchen table with my log and my coffee going cold, and he'd put his big head on my knee and just stay there. Not asking anything, just staying. A dog like that, you don't get many. He was 9 years old the spring the cub came. Now here's where I have to tell you about the winter, because the cub doesn't make sense without it. That winter was a bad one. I mean a genuinely bad one, the kind old-timers measure other winters against. Snow came early in October and never really let up, storm after storm rolling down off the Sangre de Cristos, and the temperatures dropped and stayed dropped. I lost 11 head of cattle that winter, which for an operation my size is a wound. The county road drifted shut for a week at a stretch. I ran out of certain things, coffee once, which nearly broke me, and made do. And the wildlife suffered worse than I did. That's the thing people forget. A hard winter is a slaughterhouse for everything with fur. The deer starved. The elk came down out of the high country desperate, pawing at my haystacks. And the predators, the coyotes, the bobcats, the lions, they got desperate too, because their food was dying and freezing, and the ones that survived were too weak and thin to be worth chasing. I heard the lion that winter. Heard her more than once. A cougar's got a scream that'll lift the hair right off your arms, a sound like a woman being murdered, and she screamed in the dark up on the ridge above my north pasture through February and into March. I figured she was hunting. I figured, like everything else that winter, she was just trying to stay alive. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know she'd denned up in the rocks not half a mile from my house, and I sure as hell didn't know she was dying. The night it happened I woke, because Boone was gone. He slept at the foot of my bed, had for years since Ruth passed, because I think he knew I couldn't stand the empty house and he'd appointed himself to fill it. But that night I woke around 3 and my feet were cold where his weight should have been, and I lay there a minute in the dark, confused, listening. The house ticked and settled. The wind had died down for once. And then I heard it, a sound at the back door, a scratching, a whine, urgent and low. I got up. My knees complained. I went to the back door in my long johns with a flashlight, and there was Boone, and he was agitated. I'd never seen him like that. He was packing, whining, going to the door and back to me and to the door again, and when I opened it he shot out into the snow and then stopped and looked back at me. Waiting. The way he'd wait for me to follow when he'd found a sick cow. "Boone," I said, "it's the middle of the goddamn night." He barked once sharp. So I put on my boots and my coat over my long johns, which is a picture I'm glad nobody saw, and I got the rifle off the rack because I don't go out in the dark in lion country without it, and I followed my dog out into the snow. He led me up toward the north pasture, up toward the ridge breaking trail through drifts that came to my thighs in places, and I cursed him the whole way, and he ignored me the whole way, and the cold got into my chest and made it ache. The moon was mostly full. The snow threw the light back up at the sky so the whole world glowed this pale blue, and our breath hung in clouds, and the only sound was the crunch of my boots and the whisper of Boone moving ahead of me. He stopped at the rocks below the ridge, that jumble of granite where the lion had denned, though I didn't know it yet. He stopped and he stood very still, his hackles up, and he looked back at me with an expression I can only call pleading. And then I heard it, a tiny sound, a mewling, high and thin and wretched, coming from the rocks. I raised the rifle, because my first thought, my only thought, was lion, cougar, and a cougar in the dark at close range is one of the few things on God's earth that can kill a grown man before he gets a second shot off. My hands were shaking. From cold, I told myself, though that wasn't all of it. I clicked the flashlight and swept it across the rocks, and my finger was on the trigger, and I want you to understand how close it came. How a fraction of a pound of pressure separated what happened next from what almost happened. The light found her. The mother lion. She was lying in the mouth of the den, half in and half out, and she wasn't moving. I kept the light on her and the rifle up, and I waited for her to spring, and she didn't spring, and after a long moment I understood why. She was dead. She'd been dead a while, I think. She was thin as a rail, her ribs standing out under her hide like the slats of a fence, and she'd crawled out of the den to die, or maybe she'd died trying to get back in. Starved. That whole terrible winter written on her body. And behind her, back in the dark of the rocks where the mewling came from, was the reason she'd fought so hard to stay alive as long as she had. A cub, one cub. The rest of the litter dead already, I'd learn. There were the little frozen bodies farther back, 3 of them, and I'll spare you that part. But one was alive. One had lived on her failing milk long past when it should have, and now she was gone, and it was crying in the cold, this scrap of spotted fur, eyes barely open, too young by weeks to survive a single night alone. I lowered the rifle. Boone looked at me. I have thought about that moment more than any other in my life, and I still can't tell you exactly what passed between us there in the snow, a man and a dog and a dying wilderness all around. But I know that Boone had heard that crying half a mile off in his sleep and had come to me, had woken me, had led me up here through the drifts because he knew, that there was something small and alone that needed help, and that I was the one who could give it. Too much heart, Ruth used to say, and not enough places to put it. "Boone," I said, and my voice came out rough. "What in the hell are we supposed to do with a lion?" He wagged his tail, once, and walked into the rocks toward the crying. I'll be honest with you, every ounce of sense I had said leave it. Leave it, that's what a rational man does. A mountain lion is not a stray kitten. It is a predator, an apex predator, an animal that grows into 140 pounds of muscle and teeth and instinct, an animal that can and will and does kill livestock and dogs and, on rare terrible occasions, people. I run cattle. Lions are my enemy in the most direct financial sense. Every calf a lion takes is money out of my pocket, and I've shot lions before legally, when they've turned to killing stock, and felt nothing worse than the ordinary regret of a hard job done. Bringing a lion cub into my home was, by any measure a sane person could apply, insane. And there's the law, too. You're not supposed to keep wildlife. There are permits and regulations and a whole apparatus of good reasons why an ordinary rancher shouldn't be raising a cougar in his mudroom. I knew all this standing in the snow. I picked the cub up anyway. She fit in one hand. That's the thing I remember. This creature that would grow to weigh more than my dog, and that night she fit in the palm of one gloved hand, cold as a stone, barely breathing, her tiny claws catching weakly at my glove. And when I brought her up against my chest, inside my coat, she stopped crying. Just stopped. Went quiet against the warmth of me. And I felt her heart going, this frantic little flutter, and something in my own chest that had been shut and locked for 4 years came loose. I don't know how to say it better than that. Something came loose. Ruth would have known what to do. Ruth was the soft one, the one who took in every broken thing, the three-legged dog, the blind cat, the fledgling bird she'd feed with an eyedropper. I was the practical one. I was the one who said, "We can't save everything, Ruth," and she'd say, "Maybe not, Cole, but we can save this one." And I'd grumble and I'd let her, because the truth I never told her was that I loved her most exactly for that, for the stubbornness of her mercy, for the way she'd fight the whole cold universe to keep one small heart beating a little longer. She's been gone 4 years, and I'm standing in the snow with a dying lion cub against my chest, and I hear her voice as clear as if she's beside me. "We can save this one." "All right," I said out loud to her, to Boone, to the dead mother, to nobody. "All right, Ruth." And I carried the cub home. Boone walked the whole way pressed against my leg, looking up at the bulge in my coat, and every few steps he'd give this soft, anxious whine, and I understood that he'd already decided something I hadn't caught up to yet. That this was his. That he'd found her and woken me and led me here, and now she belonged to him, to us, and he was going to see it through. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I got the cub warm, wrapped her in a towel, and set her in a box near the wood stove, built the fire up till the kitchen was hot as August, and I sat there watching her and trying to remember everything I knew about raising an orphaned animal, which was a great deal, actually, because I'd bottle-raised more orphan calves than I could count. The principles were the same. Warmth first, then food, then patience. I didn't have the right milk. I had cow's milk, which isn't ideal, and I doctored it the way you doctor it for a calf that's not thriving, warmed it and fed it to her off the corner of a rag because I didn't have a bottle small enough, and for a long time she wouldn't take it, and I thought I was going to watch her die anyway. My hands were clumsy. I was so afraid of hurting her, this tiny thing. It was Boone who fixed it. He'd been watching from across the kitchen, not allowed too close because I was afraid he'd be too rough, but around dawn he made a sound I'd never heard him make, a low, crooning sort of noise deep in his chest, and the cub's ears turned toward it. Turned toward him. And I thought, well, what the hell, I'm out of ideas, and I let him come over. He lay down beside the box, put his big head down next to it, and made that crooning sound again. And the cub, who wouldn't take milk from me, who was fatting, who I'd half given up on, the cub crawled toward that sound. Crawled out of her towel toward my dog like he was the only warm thing in the world, and pressed herself against the side of his face, and he held very still and let her. And after a minute she started to nurse at the corner of his jaw the way she'd have nursed at her mother. There wasn't anything there for her. He's a male dog, but she nursed at him anyway, comforted by it, and while she was calm like that I got the milk-soaked rag to her mouth and this time she took it. She fed. I sat back on the kitchen floor and I put my hand over my mouth, and I did something I hadn't done since the day we buried Ruth. I cried. I named her Sage. Not right away. For the first week I didn't name her, because naming a thing is a way of admitting you've decided to keep it, and I kept telling myself I hadn't decided. I'd tell myself I was just getting her strong enough to hand over to the wildlife people, and then I'd find a reason not to call them, and then another reason, and by the end of that week I understood I was lying to myself and I stopped. I named her Sage because of the color of her eyes when they finally opened all the way, this pale gray-green, the exact color of the sagebrush on my hills in the flat light of morning. And because sage grows where nothing else will, in the dry and the hard places, stubborn and silver and alive. Ruth would have liked that name. That's the truth of why I chose it if I'm being honest, which I'm trying to be. Those first weeks were a war. I don't want to dress it up. There was a night her breathing went wrong and I sat up till 3 with her on my chest, feeling every breath, sure each one was the last. There was a stretch where she wouldn't feed and dropped weight, and I drove 90 minutes each way to a vet who I paid handsomely to keep his mouth shut, and who told me flat out he didn't think she'd make it. There was the constant low-grade terror of doing something wrong, of my own ignorance killing her, of failing this small life the way I'd failed. Well, the way you fail, when someone you love is dying and there's not one thing your hands can do about it. I'd sat by Ruth's bed at the end and I'd been so useless, so enormous and clumsy and helpless, all that strength I'd spent my life being proud of worth exactly nothing when it counted. I couldn't save her. I couldn't do the one thing. And some part of me, I see this now, though I didn't then, some part of me took that lion cub as a second chance at a fight I'd already lost once. Not a fair thing to put on an animal, but hearts aren't fair. Mine wasn't. Through all of it, Boone never left her. He slept beside her box. He cleaned her. When she cried in the night, it was Boone who got to her first, always that crooning sound, that big gentle head. He'd bring her things, a sock, a scrap of leather, once a live mouse he'd caught and carried in unharmed and set down beside her like an offering, and I laughed for the first time in what felt like a year at the look of confusion on his face when the mouse ran off. He was, and I know how this sounds, a father to her. He'd decided that in the snow, the night he found her, and nothing in the following weeks changed his mind. And Sage, for her part, imprinted on him utterly. She thought she was a dog. Why wouldn't she? A dog was the first warm thing she'd known, the thing that fed her and cleaned her and kept her safe. She learned to be what Boone was. She watched him the way I'd watched my whole life, the way you learn a thing by loving the one who does it. When he barked, she tried to bark and made instead a strange chirping cough that was the funniest and saddest thing I ever heard. When he lay down, she lay down. When he came to me for his ears to be scratched, she came too and butted her head against my hand, and I'd feel that head getting bigger and heavier and stronger every single week, and I'd think, what have I done? What in God's name have I done? Because she was going to grow up. That was the thing I couldn't get around. The thing that sat in my chest like a stone through all those weeks of warmth and milk and small victories. She was going to grow up into a mountain lion. And a mountain lion is not a house pet, no matter how gently it's raised, no matter how much it loves you. Instinct runs deeper than love. Every rancher knows that. I'd built my whole life on knowing that. I wrote in my log, one night that spring in pencil in my crabbed hand. Sage feeding good now. Boone won't leave her side. She is going to break my heart. I know it and I'm doing it anyway. God help me, I think Ruth would be proud. I didn't know then how right I was about the heartbreak. And I didn't know, couldn't have known, that I was wrong about almost everything else. By the time Sage was 6 months old, she weighed 40 pounds and could have killed a full-grown deer. And she slept every night curled against Boone's belly with her paw over his neck like a child, holding a stuffed animal. I want to describe her to you because the numbers don't do it. 40 pounds of cougar is not 40 pounds of dog. She moved like water poured downhill. She was pure economy of motion, not one wasted gesture, and when she stalked a moth across the kitchen floor, and she stalked everything, moths, dust, the shifting light, you could see the whole terrible machinery of her, the coiled patience, the explosion of the pounce. She was beautiful in a way that made my throat tight. There's a beauty that has nothing to do with prettiness, a beauty that's really just the sight of a thing being exactly what it was made to be. That was Sage. She was a lion being a lion, right there in my kitchen, drinking cream out of Boone's water dish. And she was gentle. That's the part I still can't fully explain, the part the wildlife biologist who eventually came out here will get to that fully explain either. She was gentle. Boone had raised her, and Boone was the gentlest creature I ever knew, and somehow that had taken. She'd take food from my fingers with a mouth that could have taken my hand and never so much as scratched me. When she played with Boone, she pulled every blow, sheathed every claw, and the one time she forgot herself and nipped him too hard, she cried, actually cried, this pitiful chirping wail, and pressed herself against him and licked his ear till he forgave her, which he did instantly because he was Boone. I started to let myself hope. That was the dangerous part, hope. I'd sworn off it 4 years back, decided it was a young man's luxury I'd outgrown, and here was this animal cracking me open again against my will. I let myself think, maybe she's different. Maybe the raising took deeper than the instinct. Maybe I get to keep this one. Every rancher in the county would have told me I was a fool. Some of them did. Word gets around. You can't raise a cougar in secret forever, not when the mailman sees her in the window, not when you have to buy the kind of meat you have to buy. Old Hutchins from the next spread over drove up one day, sat in his truck, and told me through the window that I was out of my mind and that thing was going to eat me in my sleep, and he wasn't going to come to my funeral to say I told you so, but he'd think it. Then he drove off. That's about as much neighborly concern as Hutchins is capable of, and honestly it touched me a little. He wasn't wrong to worry. I knew he wasn't. I lay awake plenty of nights doing the same worrying myself. The reckoning came in the fall, and it came the way these things do, all at once and from a direction I wasn't watching. There was a calf, a late calf born to a heifer who shouldn't have been bred but got herself bred anyway, the way cattle do, and this calf was small and sickly, and I'd brought it into the barn to nurse it along, same as I'd nursed Sage, same as I'd nursed 100 others. And one October morning I came out to the barn and the calf was dead, and there was blood, and there was Sage standing over it. I stopped in the barn door and my whole body went cold. This was the thing. This was the exact thing I'd spent months telling myself might not happen and knowing in my gut would. This was instinct, running deeper than love, running deeper than any raising, the thing every rancher knows. She'd killed a calf. She'd found the small, weak thing in the night, and the machine inside her, the thing she was made to be, had woken up and done what it was made to do. And I stood there in the door with my heart breaking and my hand already, God forgive me, thinking about the rifle, because a lion that kills stock is a lion you have to deal with. And I'd known that from the start, and I'd done it anyway, and now here was the bill come due. Sage looked up at me. There was blood on her muzzle, and she flinched. She saw my face and she flinched, and she left the calf, and she came to me low to the ground, belly down, ears back, making that chirping cry, and she pressed herself against my legs the way she did when she'd hurt Boone, the exact same way, crying, asking to be forgiven for a thing she didn't understand she'd done. She knew I was upset. She didn't know why. And she was doing the only thing she knew how to do about it, which was to come to me, to press against me, to cry until I forgave her. I want to tell you I was strong in that moment. I wasn't. I sat down in the dirt of the barn floor next to a dead calf with a 40-pound blood-muzzled cougar crying in my lap, and I put my arms around her and I didn't reach for any rifle, and I said out loud, "It's all right. It's all right. You didn't know. It's all right." And I understood, sitting there, that I'd already made my decision months ago, in the snow, the night I picked her up. That there was never really going to be a version of this where I put her down. That I'd known that and lied to myself about it, the same as I'd lied about handing her to the wildlife people, because the truth was too big to look at straight. But I also understood, sitting there, that I couldn't keep her the way I'd been keeping her, because the next thing she killed might not be a calf. The barn cats slept in that barn, and beyond the barn cats. I didn't finish the thought, but I finished it later, alone, at the kitchen table, with my log open and the pencil not moving. There were kids in this county. There was a school bus that stopped at the end of my road. I'd been telling myself a story about a gentle lion, and I'd let it blind me to the size of the gamble I was making with lives that weren't mine to gamble. That was the morally heavy thing. That's the decision I have to tell you about, because you asked for the true story and not the campfire one. I called the wildlife biologist the next week. A woman named Dr. Alina Reyes, out of the state university, who worked with big cats and who came recommended by the vet who'd kept my secret all those months. I'd expected a lecture. I'd expected to be told I was a criminal and a fool and to have Sage taken away in a cage, and I'd braced for it the way you brace for a blow you know is coming and deserve. And Dr. Reyes did tell me, in fairness, that what I'd done was illegal and dangerous, and that she was obligated to report it. But then she came out to the ranch, and she watched Sage for 3 days. And on the 3rd day she sat with me on the porch in the evening. Sage and Boone sprawled together in the last of the sun, and she was quiet for a long time. "I've studied these animals for 20 years, she finally said. "I've never seen this. What you have here," she shook her head. "She's not tame. I want to be clear about that. She's not a house cat. Everything she did to that calf she'll do again given the trigger. The instinct is intact. You can't train it out and you can't love it out." "I know," I said. "That's why I called you." But she watched Sage lift her head and yawn, that enormous yawn, all those teeth, and then settle back down against Boone with a sigh. "But the social bonding is real. The attachment is real. She's imprinted on the dog and through the dog on you. That's Mr. Whitaker, that's not nothing. Most people who try what you tried end up with a dangerous animal that hates them. You've got something else. I don't have a word for it." I didn't either. We talked a long time, into the dark, and what we worked out was this: not a neat solution because there wasn't one, but the best that 2 people could manage. Sage couldn't be released. She didn't know how to be wild. She'd starve, or she'd come back, or she'd walk up to the first human she saw and get herself shot. And she couldn't be a house pet, not really, not with the barn cats and the school bus and the calf in the ground. But there was a middle way. There was a licensed sanctuary 200 miles south, a place with real space and real expertise and other cats, run by people Dr. Reyes trusted, and they could give Sage a life. A protected life, a safe one for her and for everyone around her. The catch, and there's always a catch, isn't there, was Boone. "She's bonded to the dog," Dr. Reyes said carefully. "If you separate them, I don't know what it does to her, or to him." I want to skip this part. I've never told it all the way through, not even to Marla, not even to the tourists who want the warm ending. But you asked for the true story. I took Boone with her. That's what I decided. The sanctuary agreed to it reluctantly, because it was unusual, because a dog living inside a big cat enclosure is not something they'd ever done. But Dr. Reyes went a bat for it and they agreed to try. And so on a cold morning in November, I loaded my 9-year-old dog and my 45-pound lion into a livestock trailer I'd padded and warmed, and I drove them 200 miles south to leave them both behind. I gave up my dog, you understand. I gave up Boone, the dog who'd slept at the foot of my bed and filled the empty house after Ruth, the dog who put his head on my knee when the coffee went cold, the best dog I ever had or ever will have. I gave him up, because Sage needed him and I couldn't keep her and I couldn't send her off alone into a strange place to grieve me. Boone was the only thing that would make it survivable for her, so Boone had to go. He knew. That's the thing that finished me. When I opened the trailer at the sanctuary and led them into that big beautiful enclosure with its rocks and its trees and its clean straw, Boone looked back at me. He stood there in the gate with Sage already exploring, already chirping, already halfway to being all right. And Boone looked back at me and he understood exactly what was happening, that I was leaving, that this was goodbye, that I'd chosen. And he didn't cry and he didn't fight it. He just looked at me with those old soul eyes, that quality of attention that had always felt almost human, and then he turned and went to Sage, went to his job, went to the small life that needed him more than I did. Too much heart, Ruth, and he found the place to put it. I drove home 200 miles with an empty trailer and an empty truck and an empty house waiting at the end of it, and I don't remember most of the drive. That was 2 years ago. I go down every month. It's a long drive, but I make it, first Sunday of every month, rain or shine or snow. And I want to tell you what I found, because it's the part of the story that saves it, the part that makes the sacrifice something other than just loss. Sage remembers me. She's 110 pounds now, full-grown, magnificent, a creature that could kill me without effort. And every first Sunday she hears my truck coming up the sanctuary road. Hears it, they tell me, before anyone else does, her head coming up, her whole body turning toward the sound. And when I come to the enclosure, she runs to the fence and she stands up against it and she chirps. That same chirp. The one she made as a cub. This 110-pound lion making the small sound she made when she fit in my hand. And I put my fingers through the mesh where I'm allowed to, and she presses her huge head against them, and she purrs. Cougars purr, did you know that? Loud as an engine. She presses her head to my hand, and she purrs like an engine, and I stand there like an old fool and let her. And Boone. Boone is 11 now and gray in the muzzle and slow. His hips are going the way mine are. But he's alive and he's happy. And when I come, he leaves Sage's side and comes to the gate, and I'm allowed inside the outer enclosure to sit with him. And he puts his big gray head on my knee the way he always did. And we sit there, the two of us, old men in the sun, while Sage watches from her rock with those sage-green eyes. He chose to stay with her. That's the truth of it. The sanctuary told me early on that if I wanted to take Boone home, they'd manage Sage without him, that they'd figure something out. And I thought about it. God, I thought about it, all those nights alone in that empty house. But every time I came down and saw the two of them together, saw the way Sage still slept curled against him, saw the way he still cleaned her, still crooned to her, still fathered her though she was 3 times his size now, I understood that I couldn't. That taking Boone would be taking Sage's whole world to fill the hole in mine. And I'd already lost too many arguments to my own selfishness in my life to lose that one. So I leave them together, and I drive home alone, and I keep my log. The tourists come now sometimes. The sanctuary does public days, and word got around about the lion who was raised by a dog, the lion who purrs at an old rancher through the fence, and people drive out to see it. They love the story. They love the ending, the beautiful cat, the loyal dog, the tearful reunions. They cry, some of them. Marla, who runs the sanctuary gift shop and who I've grown fond of these 2 years, she says my story sells more calendars than anything else they've got. And I let them have the warm version. I do. I stand at the fence and I let Sage press her head to my hand, and I let people take their pictures, and I don't tell them about the calf, or the rifle I almost reached for, or the 200 miles of empty truck, or the 4 years of empty house before any of it, or Ruth. I don't tell them what it cost, because they don't want that story and it isn't theirs to carry. But you asked, so I told you the true one. Here's the thing I've come to, the thing I wrote in my log just last month, first Sunday, pencil, my crabbed old hand, sitting in my truck in the sanctuary parking lot before the long drive home. Went down. Sage remembered me, purred at the fence. Boone's slowing down. Won't be many more years for him. Sat with them both in the sun. Ruth, I couldn't save you, and I know it, and I've made my peace with it as much as a man makes peace with a thing like that. But you were right about the one thing. You were right that we can save this one. She's alive down there, purring in the sun, because a dog with too much heart woke me one night in the snow. I don't know what any of it means. I don't think it has to mean anything. She's alive and she's happy and she knows me. Some nights that's enough. Some nights it isn't, but she's alive. I keep meaning to stop there, to let that be the end of it. But there's a thing I haven't put in the log yet. A thing I only noticed last Sunday and haven't decided what to do about. And I'll tell you because you've earned it, sitting through all of this. Sage is pregnant. The sanctuary doesn't know how. There's not supposed to be a male in her enclosure. But there's a young male in the next pen over, and lions are lions, and fences are only fences. And Dr. Ray's called me Tuesday and told me, and I've been sitting with it all week. There are going to be cubs. Cubs raised in that enclosure by a mother who was raised by a dog who was raised, in whatever way I raised anything, by me. And an old gray dog who fathered a lion is going to be a grandfather now, if he lasts the winter, and I don't know if he will. I don't know what happens next. I don't know what those cubs will be, raised by a mother who thinks she's half dog and half something she can't name. I don't know if Boone lasts to see them. I don't know how many more first Sundays I've got in me, with my knees and the long drive. I only know I'll be there in the spring, first Sunday, rain or shine or snow. I'll be there to see what we saved.